Grace and peace to you from God the Father and our Lord Jesus Christ. I don't know about you, but have you ever had one of those dreams where you're signed up for a class back in college or high school and you've forgotten to go all semester? And you realize that like today is the final exam or you're halfway through and you've never even dropped in the class. Well, for whatever reason, I used to get this dream pretty often, but now it's switched to religious settings where I show up in the wrong color stole, or I don't have my alb, or I'm there with no shoes on. Whatever it is for you, you likely know that sinking feeling when you realize that you've forgotten, or that things have gone wrong, or that they're handing out the test, or you're lined up with the bishop to process, and you're totally unprepared, and the panic sets in. Now, see, I have to admit that I have these kinds of dreams when I'm going through major transitions in life and I'm anxious about something. Whenever I have these dreams, I usually wake up immediately and try to figure out what it is that's looming over me or causing such distress. Most of the time, it's nothing really to be worried about. And yet, that's what we do well, or at least I do, worry. And sometimes with very just cause. As we look out in our country this weekend, we have cause to be worried. A new mass shooting each day. So the parable from Jesus invoked in me all kinds of thoughts. But it reminds me of those anxiety-provoking times. This very night, your life is being demanded of you. Now that can take on a whole new meaning for us as we look around, as we look in the mirror, as we look at our country. It's not a comforting thought. It's not really a comforting parable, to be honest. In fact, there are many discomforting aspects to what Jesus is saying. So let's take a look at the text carefully. The rich farmer is not a fool because he's wealthy. He's not being called a fool because he has saved for the future. But he is called a fool because he appears to be living only for himself. And he believes that he can secure life through possessions. So when the rich man talks in this parable, I don't know if you noticed it, but he talks only to himself. And the only person that he refers to is himself. What should I do? For I have no place to store my crops. I will do this, and I will build bigger barns, and then I will store my grain, and then I will say to my soul, soul, you have ample goods. Sounds a little self-absorbed, right? The rich man's land has produced abundantly, yet he expresses no gratitude for that. The rich man didn't, I'm sure, farmed this land all by himself, so there's no mention of all the people who's helped him to gather these goods. He has more grain and goods in storage than he could ever hope to use, and yet he has no thought of sharing it with others, maybe with family, no thought of what God might require of him in his abundance. He's blind to the fact that his life is not his own to secure, but that life itself belongs to God, and that God makes demands of those to whom he has given much to. So the rich man, I think, learns maybe the hard way what we hear of in Ecclesiastes so often. It's all vanity, vanity of vanities. And quite simply, you can't take it with you. All that hard work, and in the end, it's going to end up in someone else's hands. It's a hard lesson as we move through life and lose loved ones and then are in charge of disposing of their material goods. But you see, I think our second reading today reminds us of what's really important. But now you must get rid of all things, anger, wrath, malice, slander, abusive language from your mouth. Do not lie to one another, seeing that you have stripped off the old self with its practices and clothed yourself with a new self, which is being renewed in knowledge according to the image of its creator. Now, I got to do a bit of wandering in nature this week, and I got a good sense of being renewed in the knowledge according to the image of my creator. It sounds kind of philosophical. It's not exactly what was going through my mind at the time. But it really does have flesh and bones and leaves and flowers and tendrils and blooms. One of my favorite moments was in a local cafe, real artsy. The lady who owns its name is Moon. And there was this elderly gentleman walking around with his guitar singing songs for the patrons. And he got everybody to join in with him. He was just one of those spirits that you just are happy to be around. When I told my father about him and described how happy it made me to sing songs, the first question he asked is, well, does the restaurant pay him? Where does he live? What does he do for a living? And I said, I don't know. Don't know where he lives. Didn't even think about it. I then described how this man got people from 72 years of age to 2 years of age to sing along in the moment, happy as a clam, just free. And for all I know, this man just comes and does it because he wants to. He wants to see people smile. He wants to make people happy and to share his gifts. You see, like the rich farmer, we're tempted to think that having large amounts of money and lots of stuff is going to make us secure. It doesn't work that way. Sooner or later, we will learn that no matter how much we have is not going to bring us happiness in this life or security. No amount of wealth can protect us from tragedy, despair, illness, accidents. And no amount of money can keep our relationships healthy, keep our families from struggling. In fact, wealth and property, as we see in this text, can easily divide a family. You see, I don't think God is telling us not to save for our future. It's not that God doesn't want us to eat, drink, and be merry. This is where I would pick on Lynn if she was here. We know from the Gospels that Jesus enjoyed spending time with people, that he enjoyed eating and drinking and being with them. And that was the purpose. That was the security, living in that moment. Because the big question in this gospel today is, have we been rich towards God? Have we been rich towards one another? And I think that's a really tough question to answer. Because I don't know about you, but I start making a catalog of things that I've done that I think are good. You know, the good list and the naughty list that we make out at Christmas. But I think Jesus is getting at more than that. Have you been rich toward God? Now see, interesting enough, right after this parable, Jesus goes on to the more familiar passages that we really like, where he exhorts us not to worry about what we're going to eat, about what we're going to wear, but to consider the lilies of the field. In all of this, I think Jesus is telling us that our life with God is not just another realm where we have to sit around wondering if we're getting it right. We're invited into relationship that is already rich with grace, rich with abundance, rich with good people. And the question worth pondering, deep, deep in our souls, is, are we returning that richness to our world? Are we returning that richness to each other? What does that richness look like in your life? This very night, your life is being demanded of you, says Jesus, who knows that our life really belongs to him, that he wants us to remember this. And so he exhorts us not to get caught up in earthly things and earthly anxieties, because there's so much more to why we are here. There is so much more. Have we been generous to God? Indeed, that's the only thing that I think we need to ponder in this life. Not all the other silly ways where we think that we're lacking, that we're not enough, but that we open our eyes to find that our life is more than what we see around us, more than what we can even count, and that we really do possess beyond what we can count or imagine on any given day. And that is a gift worth treasuring. And the people of God said,